Hi, this is Reinhard from everydaysystems.com. Once again, it's been a long time since the last Everyday Systems podcast episode, and once again, I've got a great excuse. As I hope you all know, the No S Diet book came out in March. It's not exactly the bestseller yet, but it's doing pretty respectably. For about 2 hours, the memory of which I will treasure forever. It was the 8th best-selling book, diet book on Amazon.com. This was after the Woman's World article hit. I'm sure you're not all that interested in my impressive excuses, and so to make up for this long delay, I'm going to do an extra long, a supersized podcast episode this time. The subject I'm going to deal with today is S-Days Gone Wild, to use another venerable pop culture trope. What to do if you're on the no S diet and finding that excessive S days are giving you a hard time. You feel like you're eating way too much and undoing all your hard work during the week. I think this is hands down the most frequently cited problem people have with no S, and I probably should have given it more attention in the book. I did give it some, but not enough. I think it's been pretty satisfactorily addressed in a million different posts to the bulletin board, but they're all over the place. It's hard to find all those million little posts. So today, I'm going to make amends and treat the subject of excessive S days in exhaustive, possibly exhausting detail. I'm going to gather up as best I can all the S day wisdom that until now had been scattered all over the place. Apologies in advance to listeners who do not have a problem with excessive S days. Just a little disclaimer before I continue. Some people who have problems with S days might have serious eating disorders. I am not remotely qualified to advise such people. If you suspect that this is you, please stop listening now and talk to your doctor instead. I'm a computer programmer. I have zero medical credentials. You really should not listen to me. Okay, great. For the rest of you, before I discuss S days in themselves, I'd just like to emphasize that you should not worry about S days at all until you've got your N days down. And just a refresher, S days, days that start with S, special days, N days, normal days, or non-S days. So weekdays that are not holidays. If you can't go a month without having more than 1 or 2 botched N days, that's where your focus should be. Don't let S days distract you from this far more basic, more important issue. Because without a solid backbone of N days, S days don't even have any meaning. Use the online Habit Cal or a paper habit calendar, as I've described in other podcasts, to help you get a handle on what your compliance is like if you're having trouble guesstimating. Also, even long-time no-S pros, people who've been successfully no-S'ing for years, even I, still have over-the-top S days now and then. This is not necessarily something to worry about. When this happens, I don't berate myself or feel guilty. I don't try to compensate by being extra good after the fact. I know that big picture, it doesn't really matter. And big picture is all I care about. The biggest danger of an occasional excessive S day is not the excess calories of that one day, but that it might psychologically unhinge you, that you'll get depressed and overreact. So don't jump to conclusions from 1 or 2 times. No matter how good you are at no S, it's going to happen now and then. All right, so assuming your N day compliance is good, and it has been more than a few bad S days, that this is really a regular thing, I think there are 3 different kinds of problems that people have with S days. So in order of increasing severity and thankfully decreasing frequency, number 1, this is the case where you don't actually have a problem in terms of excess calories, but you think you do. And this is not very unusual. In fact, I think this is the most common problem. It's the thought, it's this fear rather than any underlying physical reality that's the problem. Now, I'm not saying that this is not a problem. I'm not dismissing this fear. If you think there's a problem, and so you give up or heap on unsustainable extra rules to compensate for it, that's a real problem. It's not just in your mind, or rather it is, but the just doesn't diminish its importance. I mean, the core premise of the no-S diet is that psychology, what's in your mind, is the most important part. So we do have to address this. We can't just say, oh, get over it, figure it out somehow. Problem number 2. You do have an actual problem in terms of excess calorie consumption, that's regular and ongoing, but not so serious a problem that additional prohibitions are required. A bit of attitude adjustment and maybe some informal positive tips are all that you need. Problem number 3. You, again, have a problem with excess calories on S days, and one that's serious enough to require additional rules. I don't think many people fall into this category, and I'd be very cautious about jumping to the conclusion that you do. But it is possible to add new rules on top of no-S in a way that's reasonably humane and simple and compatible with the rest of the system. And even if you don't wind up needing these extra rules, it can be a comfort to know that they exist, that you have sensible options that build on what you have instead of forcing you to tear everything down and start from scratch with a totally different system, if you should need something extra. That being said, extra rules bring extra risk, and I'm probably going to spend more time in this podcast warning you against adding these or other rules than I'm going to spend describing them. Okay, now that I've briefly mentioned these 3 levels of problems, I'm going to go into each of them in a little more depth. So, number 1, the imagine problem. There are 2 things you may think are true on S days when you're starting out that are not, in fact, true. You may, 1, think that you're eating way too much food inaccurately. This may not be true. Or 2, you may be right that you're eating too much food, but wrong in thinking that you're going to continue eating this much food S day after S day. You're falsely extrapolating. In other words, you assume that the amount of food you eat on the first few inevitably excessive weekends is how it's going to be forever, unless you pile on more rules. One of the most powerful things the no-S diet does is it makes excess seem excessive. It does this right away by limiting your intake to 3 single-plate meals during the week. If you eat a lot, it looks like a lot, piled up there on your plate, all in front of you. That's embarrassing, so gradually you pile less on your plates. That's pretty straightforward. But then something else happens. Not just your eyes, but your body comes to expect less. It's like when someone who used to be a heavy drinker, after he lays off the sauce for a while, finds that his tolerance goes down. And I speak from experience here. That a single drink can now give him a buzz as compared with the 6 or 8 or 10 drinks it used to take. During the week, you're training your body to have a new understanding of what excess means. And that is a lesson your body doesn't forget on the weekends. The point at which you feel like you're eating excessively is gradually going to become much lower. What used to be just par for the course will now seem like a shocking excess. This might be disturbing at first, but it's actually a good thing. You want that excess alarm to go off early. So don't be depressed by it. Though it might feel like it, it's probably not nearly as excessive as it would have been pre-no-S, when you had a really high tolerance for excess. Okay, so that's the first thing to keep in mind, that the excess probably isn't as bad as it seems. That it's expected for excess to seem worse, and that this is actually a good thing if you can get over the initial shock and not let it derail you. Another thing to keep in mind is that the first few weeks are almost inevitably going to be much more excessive than subsequent weeks. It takes time to train your habits and your appetite to lower your tolerance for excess. The really powerful thing about the no-S rules is not how well they work as conscious rules, although they do, but how well they train your unconscious behaviors. And that takes time. During the week, it's like you're riding a bike with training wheels. And on S days, the training wheels come off. So, of course, you're going to be a little wobbly at first. Of course, you're going to fall flat on your face a few times. You don't give up trying to learn how to ride a bike because of that. Now, I realize that this is a profoundly different way of looking at things from the way most other diets do it. When you count calories or carbs or whatever, it's a purely conscious activity. There's no training involved. It starts out pretty easy, in fact. You're as good as you're ever going to get at counting stuff or reading labels on day one. The problem is that conscious activity is very expensive. It gets tedious very fast. You want to use it for other, more important things that come up, and eventually you do, and that's the end of your diet. That's why No-S is about habit instead, about training unconscious behaviors. And it can be hard at first, and slow, but it gets easier and easier. And I think starts hard, gets easy, is ultimately vastly preferable to starts easy, gets hard. Okay, on to problem 2. This is the situation in which, for some reason, you really are eating too much on S days on a regular basis, and your end day habits aren't making it any better. It's been a while, your weekday compliance with the rules is close to perfect. The focus should always be on that. But you're not losing weight, and you don't even feel like you don't even like S days really, because you feel like a glutton. You're worried that perhaps you're even binging on S days, that you've got an unhealthy mentality about them. It may seem paradoxical, but the key to enjoying S days, the key to successful S days is enjoyment. If you can get yourself to enjoy S days, to enjoy some well thought out special treats, to enjoy the feeling of freedom that you have, I can almost guarantee you that you'll also wind up eating less. But it can be really hard to do this. A lot of people come to No-S so crippled psychologically by other diets and then yo-yoing back into gluttony that they aren't really capable of enjoying food anymore, at least initially. They have all these hang-ups about food. They no longer associate food with pleasure, really, but with guilt or with this pathetic, desperate shadow of pleasure, this rushed sense of must eat as much as possible ASAP before guilt kicks in. Long term, I think No-S is a fantastic cure for this kind of mentality, and that may even be the best thing about it, how it gets you to enjoy food again. But initially, at least, there is the danger that this binge mentality is going to map onto S days and abuse them. I think the best way around this is to proactively plan something really nice for yourself every S day. Don't just hunker down and hope you don't get too hungry. Just passively wait and see what happens. But consciously, actively reward yourself. Pamper your appetite with something it really wants, some luxury you might never have even permitted yourself before No-S for misguided, diet reasons. When your appetite sees how well it's being taken care of, it's going to relax. It's not going to feel resentful, brooding, and waiting for the first opportunity to lash out and gorge itself on whatever trash is lying around as soon as your guard is down. By preemptively rewarding yourself, you nip the two main motivations to binge in the bud. Resentment at having to put up with rules, and the random crap you normally would binge on. It just isn't going to seem very tempting after you've given your appetite a taste of real quality. Reward isn't just about what you eat, it's also about how you eat. So make the presentation nice. Instead of spooning ice cream directly from the carton into your mouth, put it in a nice glass dessert bowl. Or walk over to a fancy ice cream shop and get a cone. Eat a piece of cake or pastry at a cafe sociably in the open instead of hiding by yourself in a corner in front of the TV. Don't sneak. You have no reason to sneak. This is legitimate reward. So make it seem legitimate. If you start sneaking for no reason, pretty soon you're going to have one. On S days, you're free. And freedom is a good thing, but freedom can also be abused. Ask yourself, what do you want to use your freedom for? For furtively perma-snacking all day long? Do you really enjoy that? So when you catch yourself reaching into a stale bag of popcorn automatically, ask yourself, is this really the most enjoyable use of your freedom? Put the popcorn down, think of what you really want most, and go get it. If it requires leaving the house or spending some extra money, even better. The more fuss, the more your appetite will be impressed. Freedom doesn't mean chaos. You shouldn't wake up on an S day like some tormented character out of Dostoevsky thinking everything is permitted and not having the slightest idea when or what to eat. Start with the basic single plate 3-meal structure you've established during the week. Why not, right? Then add conscious rewards. A fancy dessert after dinner, or French toast with maple syrup for breakfast, or a multi-course meal at a fine restaurant. The criterion for going beyond the basic 3-meal structure should be, will I really enjoy this? You will weed out a huge amount of excess this way at no cost in terms of pleasure. In fact, you'll gain in terms of pleasure. I think these 3 little positive attitude adjustments, proactive reward, no sneaking, and using the structure of 3 meals as your basic starting point, should be enough to turn most people with actual S-Day problems around. But some people really might require more. Now we're at problem number 3, extra rules required. Again, I strongly urge you not to jump to this conclusion. Before piling on extra rules, try Vanilla No S and give habit a chance to kick in first. Try the attitude adjustments I just described. But if you tried all this and it still doesn't work, don't give up hope. There are reasonably moderate and No S compatible extensions to the rules that you can resort to, that other people have successfully used. There's always a risk whenever you add new restrictions. It adds complexity, it adds potential for resentment and rebellion. You know all that, I've told you all that, but if you're still interested, I'm going to tell you about the best of the lot here that I've heard of. The risk-reward balance may be worth it to you. I'm going to call these extra add-on rules to No S mods, which is short for modifications. This is a common term for software system extensions that get posted to the web. Say if someone adds a new optional piece of functionality to the PHP BB bulletin board software, which is what I use on everydaysystems.com. Since I think of everyday systems as a kind of human behavioral software, it makes sense to repurpose the term mods here. All the mods I'm going to talk about build on the idea of S-events. This is well, not a completely new term, but a new term in terms of what I've podcasted about. You've heard of S-days, so now there are S-events. An S-event is every incident in which you have a snack, a sweet, or a second. So if I have 3 meals on Saturday, plus a Twix bar between breakfast and lunch, and maybe 2 courses at dinner, plus dessert, that translates into 3 S events for that S day. 1, a sweet snack, the Twix bar. 2, a seconds at dinner, and 3, a sweet dessert, which I guess could technically also count as a second. S events can fall into multiple categories, but every incident still counts as just one event. You know, even if it's a sweet snack, that's just one event, even though it's 2 S's that it's violating, or not violating, whatever. Falling into that category. Thinking in terms of discrete eating events like this is helpful even just in itself without adding any rules about how to limit them. Because the biggest danger is perma-snacking, this eating one big meal all day long. S events, thinking in this way, it chops that up. It forces you to realize there's a little bit of mental friction every time you reach for yet more food. And that alone can reduce the number of times you do it, because aha, this is another event. Here's another one, you know. Okay, so how do the mods use these S events? The first mod is the simplest. It consists of limiting yourself to 1 S event per S day, interpreting the sometimes in the explicit 14-word No S formula that's on the website as meaning once. Or you can do twice or some other similarly small predetermined number. The pro of this mod is that it's very simple. You still get some kind of, and you still get some kind of reward on S days. The con is that it's still pretty constricting. It might be very hard to get yourself to do this long term. You just imagine holidays, people pushing food in your face. The second mod is to simply resolve to log or count S events every S day. So you have no hard limit. You can eat as many snacks, sweets, and seconds as you like, just like with Vanilla No S, but you have to write them down, or at least write down the number of S events if you don't actually want to describe them. And then maybe post this to the bulletin board, sort of a confession, though hopefully more of a brag. This is an example of the power of negative tracking that I've described in a previous podcast. It's a pain to track stuff, and it can get embarrassing fast, even if you're not posting it online, just to yourself. So the pain of this tracking will exert pressure on you to keep the number of S events down, even without establishing a hard limit. The downside is that it's a pain, and also S events aren't, or they shouldn't be, intrinsically negative, as they are made to seem by this mod. I mean, the term negative tracking, right? And even though you're technically just as free as before, you can eat anything, there's a different kind of lack of freedom. You have no privacy. You feel like you've got eyeballs on you all the time. Still, it can be interesting just as an experiment, a way to gather data about how many S events you actually take on S days, before maybe coming up then with a hard limit. The third mod is my favorite, though I have to admit I don't do it myself. I don't do any of these mods myself. Vanilla, no S, out of the box, with totally unrestricted S days works great for me. The third mod divides S days into two classes. Ordinary, lowercase S days, like weekends and minor holidays, and extraordinary, capital S days, major holidays like Thanksgivings or Christmas or your birthday. On lowercase S days, you have a hard limit on S events, just like with mod number 1. But on capital S days, you're totally free, like vanilla, no S. I like this mod best because it's simple and cute, but sophisticated in terms of how it balances the costs versus benefits. You have useful, clear limits most of the time, but you still get that great feeling of total freedom now and then, and just when you need and value it the most. On these major holidays. The other two mods, even though they keep the physical food reward aspect of S days to some degree, they take away or compromise that feeling of freedom, which I think is as important as the cookies or the cake or whatever. Whatever you do not get rid of S days altogether. That's not a mod, that's a cruel and unusual butchering of the system. You don't only need S days in a negative way as a safety valve to keep you from going crazy. You positively deserve them, and you deserve to enjoy them. They can be a wonderful thing, the best thing about no S. And if it takes some tinkering to get to the point to where you can enjoy them, then tinker, but don't get rid of them. If you come up with any other S-Day mods, please post them to the Everyday Systems bulletin board or email me. As usual, there will be a discussion link right under the podcast transcript. So that page can be a kind of one-stop shopping nucleus around which our ever-increasing S-Day wisdom can accumulate, instead of being spread out all over the place on the bulletin board. And if we come up with any significant further breakthroughs, maybe I'll do another follow-up podcast on the subject. Hope this helps someone, and thanks for listening.